Our big focus, Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Canada since 2015. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to land in Calgary to participate in the G7 summit that is taking place in Canada. And during his 23-hour touchdown, our Prime Minister will address the G7 outreach session and have bilateral meetings, including with host Canadian Prime Minister Carney, before departing for Croatia. You must note that the US President Donald Trump has cut short his trip to Canada for a meeting with world leaders, and he's flying back to Washington. This is what the White House has confirmed, citing what's going on in the Middle East as we speak. The White House has said that they actually declared this about an hour after the president said that people in Iran's capital, Tehran, should evacuate immediately. Donald Trump, though, was originally supposed to arrive back in the US in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Maha Siddiqui has been tracking all the G7 action on ground zero for us. She joins us live this morning with a quick update from Alberta. Maha, thanks so much as always. On the ground, tell us, are we seeing more geopolitical substance or more political theatre? And take us through the Prime Minister's plan of action for the day.
Let's start with the G7 summit, Parameshwar. The summit itself now, at the moment, there is a lot of interest there, considering that President Trump, once again, at a summit that is being hosted by Canada, is leaving early. Though the circumstances are much different. Last time around, he left in a huff when he accused the then Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, of being dishonest and weak. He was not satisfied with the discussions that took place, and he left the G7 summit without signing on the joint communique. This time, the White House, as you pointed out, has cited the crisis and the conflict between Israel and Iran as the reason for President Trump to immediately go back to Washington, D.C. And he is leaving, therefore, a day early. So his bilateral meetings that were expected to happen, that is President Trump's, some of the bilateral meetings will not take place now because he's already leaving. He is expected to leave after a dinner of the heads of state that will happen this evening. He's going to fly back right after that. So now there is no possibility also of Prime Minister Modi's any possibility of a pull aside. So far, of course, there wasn't any formal point that was raised between the two sides of having any engagement or, for instance, a bilateral meeting. However, there was expectation that once the leaders are there in close quarters, there might be some exchange of talk, some conversation, but that's ruled out now. Prime Minister Modi is going to land in Calgary, in Alberta, for the G7 summit that is taking place in Kananaskis, which is about 80 kilometers from Calgary. He will be landing here and will be participating in all the G7 related events tomorrow in Kananaskis, which will be the outreach session where he'll be speaking, and then his bilateral meetings, the most critical one being with the Prime Minister of Canada, Parameshwar.
Indeed, Maha. But as Maha Siddiqui is reporting at the moment, that chance of a pull aside with the US President is obviously ruled out because Donald Trump will be departing from this summit earlier. In fact, the US President is also not expected to sign the G7 statement on the Iran-Israel conflict. Maha, this is despite other leaders' plan to call for de-escalation and the protection of civilians, even though the White House has cited the tensions in the Middle East. Yet Donald Trump is not expected to sign this G7 statement on the Iran-Israel conflict?
On the contrary, what we are seeing, Parameshwar, at the moment is President Trump having put out a statement on Truth Social, which is speaking about the evacuation of Tehran. Tehran is a city of 10 million people, and he's just cited in that Iran should have had a deal with the United States, that earlier in a statement, he had spoken about how 60 days were given to Iran, and because they did not arrive on a deal with the United States, on the 61st day, Israel attacked Iran in a way showing his tacit support to Israel in this conflict. Clearly now what we are seeing is the situation spinning out of control, worsening, and that is the reason that President Trump is now heading back to Washington, D.C. immediately. So as the G7 leaders, the other leaders of G7, and we've seen leaders asking for some resolution or bringing down the tensions, especially in West Asia, considering that we have seen an ongoing crisis, one after another, in that region. There have been calls for de-escalation, but it now appears that US, yes, this time, standing apart from the rest of the G7 members on that aspect. Coming back to India now, Prime Minister Modi will be landing in a couple of hours here. The relationship with Canada is set to improve with this move by both the sides. First, Prime Minister Carney having invited Prime Minister Modi, making a call just a week ahead of G7. But a lot of people also talking about how the fact that that invitation was accepted and that the Prime Minister decided to travel to Canada shows that the two sides want the relations to improve. And because of the signal that is coming in from both the sides, a lot of the community, from the Indian community rather, in Canada, especially students, Indian students from the largest chunk of international students in Canada, they are heaving a sigh of relief because the friction between the two countries was not auguring well for them. And I spoke with a few students who expressed themselves pretty articulately. Parameshwar, let's listen into them.
Indian students are a global lot these days. But what that means is a friction between the governments of two countries can have an immediate fallout on this younger lot. I have with me a group of students from India here in Canada. Let's speak to them about their expectations now that the relations between India and Canada seem to be improving. Many thanks all of you for speaking with NDTV. I'll start off with you. What expectation do you now have for the students, considering that there were some unique problems that students from India were facing in Canada? Do you think the fact that Prime Minister Modi is coming to Canada is a good sign even for the students?
I think it's an amazing sign, and as someone who calls herself a youth leader here in Calgary and Cheshire, I'm very, very happy to say that we, the students here as well as the Indian diaspora, we are eagerly ready to welcome Prime Minister Modi ji into Canada, and we really hope that this visit leads to a better alignment of Canada and India's values as well as their goals for both nations, and they work towards developing and building a mutually beneficial and effective relationship and alliance which can help and benefit both populations of India and Canada, and definitely can help some of our students as well, and we don't feel so split amongst our loyalties as well as amongst which country to support, to favor, because both of them are our homes. India is our Janmbhumi, Canada is our Karambhumi, and we really, really love both nations. And it absolutely hurts us and it breaks us to see the separation and the division that we see here in the Indian diaspora because of these geopolitical issues. So we really hope that the outcome of this visit leads to a more collaborative and a more positive relationship, working for the benefit of both nations.
What are some of the issues that you feel should be addressed by the two nations, especially with regards to students? Any specific issues that you want addressed?
So for me particularly, I've been here since 2013. I haven't had any specific, issues that maybe the Canadians have done to me as Canadian too, I've met many lovely people here, so I haven't had any sort of racism or anything. But I do know that, my co-workers and colleagues and everything, they have experienced certain level of racism that I do believe that should be, noticed and that should be talked about. But regardless of that, I don't think there is anything that, brings, that's bad. But another thing I wanted to talk about was, again, with their, collaboration between India and Canada, past few years their relationships had gone down. So I also hope that the relationship goes back together and everyone is okay, because again, that's our country, this is our country too. So we hope everyone's on good terms with that too.
Also, a lot of Indian students who wanted to come in the recent past have faced issues with regards to student permits and uncertainty generally around whether they can come and study in Canada and whether it will be a smooth ride. Do both of you feel that with Prime Minister Modi now coming to Canada, having been invited by Prime Minister Carney, there will be a breaking of the ice, a thawing of the ice between the two sides that will help address some of these technical issues as well?
I think
well, we certainly hope so, that it does kind of, open up those conversations. And with all of these, it's all starts from like the social stigma against immigrants that's growing in Canada, like we've seen happen in the US before us. And I'm hoping that this is a step in the right direction where, you can, like, as you mentioned, break the ice. And more importantly, you can address the issues. They're very real. The growing Hinduphobia in Canada is very real. And general distaste of immigrants is very real. And they're just not being overlooked so often. And I hope that now that we have a new Prime Minister, we have Prime Minister Modi, who was invited even though he initially wasn't, and I hope we can amend those relationships and things get a lot easier for people who are trying to come here, because as someone who was born here, who's lucky enough to call this place a home, I'm very happy living here. I think it's a great step for a lot of youths in India to come here as well, and everyone deserves to have that opportunity.
Maha Siddiqui still live with us, joining us with what's happening in Alberta at the moment. Maha, how does India really navigate a G7 that seems so deeply divided within, whether it's on war, on trade and Trump? We're also picking up on some protests in Calgary.
Well, as far as navigating issues within the G7 for invitee countries, that really isn't something within their ambit. They have been invited because of their, for instance, in India's case, they have been invited for their growing economic stature. India is the fourth largest economy and poised to be the third in a few years. And therefore, it is relevant to the G7. The G7 is, of course, a grouping of the richest countries and the European Union. And India is a critical peg in the supply chains as well. That is why India has been invited since 2019 G7 summit in France and Biarritz. And Prime Minister Carney also recognizes that. For Canada, also to mend ties with India is important at this juncture, Parmeshwar, because of what we've seen Canada face with regards to its neighbor in the south, the United States. They feel betrayed. They feel that there is economic coercion that could lead up to annexation of Canada, and they want to diversify, have more trading partners. In that context, India becomes very relevant and important for Canada. In fact, I also spoke with a group of business persons, Indo-Canadian business persons. I asked them about what are the sectors where they see more growth, more cooperation, and how do they expect trade to improve between the two sides with this visit of the Prime Minister listening.
Feeling a sense of betrayal from the United States, Canada is looking to diversify its trading partners. And here's where India comes into focus. As a critical country in the Indo-Pacific, Canada recognizes the importance of India, and the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, wants to leverage this relationship now by the first step that he's taking in trying to improve the ties. How will this help the trading community as well, which has been looking out for improvement in ties? I have with me a group of business persons here in Calgary, and they are keenly awaiting the Prime Minister's visit in the hope that this will act as an icebreaker. What are the sectors where you see an improvement in trade between India and Canada, especially once the relationship gets better?
Yeah, I think it would be mainly oil and gas, which is basically India is importer. LNG they can import from Canada, and then oil also. And that is the big for India. And then for Canada, it is vice versa. It should be basically defense and technology and IT.
India's goods trade with Canada is highly under potential. As far as services trade is concerned, it is slightly better. Do any of you see any other sectors where you believe that improvement is going to impact the overall relationship as well, make the two countries come closer via trade? You want to say?
Thank you for the question. I think this is a very important point for the Canadian. As we all know, as a Canadian, there are lots of healthcare issues here in Canada. And as an individual, as a group, all Canadian, most of them are waiting to get the treatment. I will give you just a small example very quickly. One of my known's husband, he diagnosed with the last stage cancer, and they told us that he's here for only for 3 months, but the waiting list is for 6 months. So this is what we are all Canadians are facing, and this is very, very important. We are looking for a healthcare industry, and India is the one that we can look forward.
With regards to issues like visas as well, they become a problem whenever there is a friction between the two countries, causing a lot of problem to the common man. But I want you all to explain the fallout on the trading community as well, the business persons, when such visa hurdles are created.
So I can say one thing, there is so many gossips going between both countries. Right now, the relation going to start right away. So might be once they sit both countries together, there is so many things they have to settle, and especially the visa, student visas or work permits. Right now, 2025, there is so many visas is expiring. Fortunately, if both countries has like a good relation, definitely they can give like a good opportunity for the newcomers or like students or everyone. We are expecting those things, and certainly these things will settle by this G7 meeting. Hope for best. That's it.